guys. This is the Unifoil team here. Welcome to the first ever live Q&A with Clifford, our designer. This is going to be an ongoing thing. We're probably going to have it once every 2 weeks or once every month, where you guys can email in your questions. Eventually, it'll be a live Q&A where you can join and ask Clifford anything that might have been on your mind, anything about foil design or the foiling industry. So in the first one, we're just going to use it as a little bit of a get to know the team and get to know Clifford, a bit about his background, how we got into designing foils and where we think foiling's going in the future. So without further ado, we'll get into it. My name's Toby Atkins. I'm the general manager of Unifoil. I'm joined here with James and Clifford. So guys, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Hey guys, I'm James. I run the customer side of the business and warranties and whatnot. I've been foiling for a few years, and yeah, just excited to work with the Unifoil team, bringing out amazing products and best foiling gear.
My name's Clifford. I'm the designer for Unifoil. I do all the foil designs. I've been doing foiling now full time for 5 years, just over 5 years. Yeah.
And I do all the shit jobs that no one else wants to do.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, let's get into it. So the first question I have here for Cliff is, how'd you get into foiling and how'd you get into designing foils?
So it was actually just a bit of fun with a mate of mine. We just came up with the idea that one day at my workshop we're like, hey, let's make a foil. I had been tinkering with the idea, but I didn't actually think I'd actually get around to trying it because it just looked really difficult. At that time, foiling, just when you saw it on YouTube or on the internet, it just looked like it was something that was really difficult to do. And it was just that initial challenge that I was looking forward to, actually making the foil. Writing it, that I didn't think I'd get very far with it, to be quite honest. But I thought the actual making of it was what I was looking forward to. And we spent a few hours in the workshop, made one out of bits of wood and some carbon wrapped around, and I made the front wing on the CNC machine. But at that time we were kite foiling, so the foils are very small.
Yeah.
So learning to get going was quite painful because you had to have quite a bit of speed before the foil would engage. And the wipeouts were quite spectacular. After every session, you were guaranteed whiplash. But that's pretty much how I got into it, eh?
And so I remember you were telling me that before that, you were designing gliders and things like that, and that's kind of how you got the inspiration for foils and your designs and everything.
Well, doing the gliders had a huge effect on my knowledge on knowing how to do foils. That's how I got into composites, was through radio-controlled gliders. You make your first glider, and once you've flown it, it's just this challenge of going faster and faster and faster. And the only way you can do it is to go to better and better materials. So in the beginning, you start off with this like foam and tape, and as you progress through it, you have to go to composites if you want to go fast. And just learning how slope sawers work, they're literally identical to foils, but they're just flying through the air. They also just glide on the tiniest bits of energy, and so that had a huge influence on knowing where to start or where to go with the foils. It really helped.
So how much of what you learned in gliding, like, could you take over to foiling, and how much of it you had to kind of figure out because of the different way that it goes through water? Like what
Well,
percent?
the basics of flight. Once you've passed the basics of flight, then the hydrofoils start to go on their own tangent compared to the aircraft, because with a foil you actually want a unstable platform, whereas with an aircraft you want a stable platform. So, but the whole pitching forward and the counterbalance of your tail stabilizer, all of that is exactly the same.
Yeah, right. And
So,
then where does turning come into it as well? Like, because are you turning gliders tightly like the way that you would surf a wave and wanting to do direction changes and
well, the immediate basics on an aircraft is if you put in dihedral, which is when the wings are like this, you generate stability. And I remember in the early days, this is the first thing I wanted to do. I thought, if you put dihedral in this wing, it'll make the foil so easy to ride. And this is a typical newbie perception. And a lot of guys ask the question on the internet. And fortunately, I didn't have to make one because the guys had already tried it and they've said, what happens is you end up with a foil that's too stable and it just wants to go in a straight line. So the moment you want to try and turn it, it doesn't want to turn, it fights you. So actually quite recently, I actually got to ride one. One of the local guys here made a foil that had just a little bit of dihedral in it. And in a straight line, it was incredibly stable. You could stand so easily. But the moment you came to do a jibe, it just went straight and you went off. So it doesn't turn. It does not want it. It fights you. It literally it fights you. So yeah, I mean that's one of the biggest differences. Whereas with a hydrofoil, generally, if you want to be able to turn really easily in the water, you tilt the wings in this direction, so that when you carve, you lose lift off the one side and you generate off the other, and it turns through a lot easier.
yeah, right. A lot of people know you and know Unifoil as, inventing the first high aspect surf wing at least. Do you want to speak a little bit about how you got to that, like, where you found your inspiration, and also how many designs and iterations had you worked on before you got to that?
So it started with working with the guys in Cape Town with Ivan and Nathan van Vieren, where they started to do downwind runs. And we were talking about foils, and I knew immediately a high aspect foil is um, is very high in efficiency, and that's exactly what you want. The human body can only put out so many watts, and your whole fight is against about being as efficient as possible. And I knew that doing a high aspect foil was going to be king. So I had Nathan. He did a downwind and he had a GPS on him just to get an idea of what sort of speed he was doing, and then just working from that, I did my first drawing uh, of I think it was a 175 at that time, and I remember the first video that Nathan sent back, because at that time the guys that held the record for the downwind run were surf skiers, and when he did this downwind run with a foil, I think he like halved the record kind of thing. It was absolutely ridiculous. And watching this video, it's actually on YouTube, where he comes past the surf skier and he's screaming his head off. He's just shouting, as he goes flying past. And he goes past this guy like he's literally sat there, still. He's going so fast. And yeah, we knew we were onto something, just because of his cruise speed and his ability to stay on the foil for such a long time. And I mean, we were still very new to this, it was very early days. And then soon after that, they were invited to go to Hawaii to do the M2O, which was yeah, it was an amazing race. It was probably midnight or 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning when I was watching it live. And what an achievement! I mean, he came second, and he used that high aspect foil, and from there, yeah, it just blew up. The moment that foil hit Hawaii and everybody saw what the high aspect foils were doing, with terms to efficiency. It was, yeah, that's how it pretty much took off.
That's gone full circle then, because that's sup downwinding as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is where everyone's going now with the sport.
Well,
So,
it's the ultimate, isn't it?
yeah,
That's what everybody's chasing after.
that ultimate efficiency.
Yeah.
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 God, I'm still just getting my head around the idea of designing a foil and learning to foil at the same time. Learning to foil was hard enough.
I tell you what, for me personally, it was, is this foil even going to work?
Mm,
You know, now you're trying to do the sport where it's already difficult as it is, and now you're using stuff that you've knocked up in your garage, and you think, is it even going to work?
yeah.
So that was pretty cool. But then, yeah, what happened was after that first iteration, then it was, you know, straight to the drawings, and then it was just this chase of making better and better. And then I started doing, you know, proper molds, and I had this pile of foils collecting up in the workshop, and I didn't just want to throw them in the bin, so I stuck them on our local Gumtree website, and yeah, they started selling. And from one guy would phone me up and it's like, listen, my mate got a foil from me. Can you make me one? And that's literally how it took off. And the next thing I know is I'm just making foils to fill these orders that these guys want. You know, hydrofoils. But that back then it was for kiting. And yeah, then I came to Jeffreys Bay, and I actually had my setup in the back of my truck. And I was at a mate's house, Gumby's house, and he saw this foil in the back of the truck, and he's like, "What is that?" So about just literally within 2 weeks, he phoned me up and he's like, "Dude, do you think you can make one of those that you can surf?" And I was like, "Yeah, I can't see why not. We can give it a go." And made this prototype, and we stuck it onto a supboard. And Gumby doesn't really take to supping very well. You know, he had this paddle and he just looked so awkward. So he tossed the paddle. He's like, "No, I'll paddle this thing in prone." And yeah, he caught a wave and he's like, "No, the foil needs to be bigger." And that wing was actually quite a high aspect wing. So I just extended the cord of it. And he's like, "And listen, we've got to get rid of the supboard." So he had an old surfboard. I think it was a 6 foot or a 7 foot surfboard. And we went over to his place. We were busy glassing in the mast, and while the resin was still busy drying, we were busy driving to the to the sea to get this thing going. And the first time that he caught a wave, because he is in the water, and one of his mates paddled up and was sat next to him, and he didn't know that there's a foil stuck to the bottom of this board, and he caught a wave, and yeah, Gumby lifts up out of the water like this. This guy just freaked out. He was like, "What?" And yeah, Gumby's flying down this wave, 2 foot, 3 foot in the air. It was crazy. Yeah. You could hear the guys shouting, from the beach. It was incredible. It was because it's unheard of. It was still very, very niche back then.
So around what year was this?
That was 20. I think it was 2017, 2016 or 2017. I think it was 2017. I can
Wow.
check. I can't remember. I think it was
We
either
got Gumby to
late
thank.
2016 or early 2017, somewhere around there.
So we got
So
Gumby to
yeah, but
thank for bringing in the phone.
yeah, I tell you what,
Excellent.
I don't know if I would have bothered to have made a surf foil because it wasn't my.
And just going back to something you brought up about the guys from Signature, obviously there's the South African connection, and Nathan's one of the best foilers in the world. And a lot of people know that Uni and Signature were affiliated, and they were using your designs for a while. And so how did that kind of work out, and what did they contribute, and what's going on now with it?
Well, it was awesome. Signature did all the uni's advertising, so that was really cool. We Unifoil was this tiny little brand coming out of Jeffreys Bay, which is a tiny little town. we've got one traffic light. I mean, that's how small Jeffreys Bay is. If you don't know, it's a tiny little town, and Cape Town's like the mecca for wind sports. You know, the wind blows there; it blows you sideways. So, being able to have Ivan sell to market unifoils, or to market signatures, I should rather say, was definitely um, if it wasn't for them, Unifoil wouldn't be where we are now, without a doubt. You know, that's without a doubt. But it did get to a stage where, you know, it created a lot of confusion. Guys are like, you know, what's going on? What's the difference? Is it the same company? Isn't it the same company? You know, how does it go? And when Unifoil started to grow, I had to make a decision. You know, what was I going to do with Unifoil? I was going overseas, and so yeah. Then Ivan, we obviously we got different designs. So Ivan got new designs coming out, which were signature specific, and Unifoil came out with Unifoil's own specific designs. So that's pretty much how we, you know, went two different paths.
Yeah, right. And then, you know, I guess Nathan was probably the first big profile foiler that you worked with on designs and everything. And then since then, you've gone on to work with some of the biggest in the game, Adam Bennett, and recently Eric Antonsen, Dylan Wickman. How do those guys and working with those kind of writers like help you and push your designs forward?
Well, back in the early days, I mean, when Unifoil really started to get noticed, I had international riders buy plane tickets and fly here and buy foils. And then, you know, to work with Adam was awesome. You know, to put a rider's name on a foil, I think is awesome. I think that's the way foiling is going to go. It's like skateboarding. Riders would have their own signature foils, and that's how I think the sport's going to go. But yeah, I mean, we'll have to wait and see. But to work with the riders was great. To work with Adam was an awesome privilege. To be able to listen to his inputs as to what he wanted and how he wanted the foil to react, and, you know, speed it up, slow it down, turn the tide, whatever it was, and then to actually make it, send it out to him, make adjustments. And yeah, that's how we made the Vipers. And pretty much the same story with the progressions. Eric has a wealth of knowledge, just purely because he's ridden so many foils. He knows exactly what he wants, and, you know, the suggestions that he makes, you take them into consideration, and to be able to make one like this, and then to try that suggestion, make one like that. Yeah, it's been awesome, really been awesome. And also, like I say, Eric has a wealth of knowledge. He was very specific on what he wanted in the foil, and very happy with the foil. So that was a real relief, that it wasn't. He could give me enough information that I could work with. It wasn't watered down. It was very specific. Let's try this at, you know, fixed size. So yeah, it worked really, really well.
And he seems to be someone who's got technical knowledge and can talk about the fine detail as well. So there's a huge amount of feedback there, isn't there?
Yeah, I was just a few months ago over at his house in Jack's Beach, and his garage is just full of foils. There must be like 20 of every different type of foil mast.
Wow.
And he's just so impressive that he keeps records of everything. There's all logs of everything and measurements, and which was, it was, he taught me a lot just in the few days that I was there. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So, and then you contrast that with some of the other riders, like, you know, that might not be as tech, but then they go on fields and everything like that. So, like, how do you have to adjust working with different riders? Is it like, and do you have any preferences or anyone that I don't know, this is probably a question you can't answer, but people you prefer working with, or
No, it's been awesome. Everyone that I've worked with has been awesome. The feedback is phenomenal. I get guys, because obviously it's international now. I get messages at 3 o'clock in the morning where the guys are just frothing. Got the new whatever it was, and just the excitement is just. It's so awesome. It is so awesome. I really like that. It's that I've had this amazing privilege to design something, get it to market, and to have somebody else ride it and go, wow. And it's a tremendous sense of satisfaction. I must say I've really enjoyed that.
yeah, and I've noticed being a part of the R&D process as well with you, and seeing that it seems like as you do more and more of these collabs with riders, you're getting your the amount of prototyping down to almost like you're getting it from the first couple that you send out, whereas before you might have taken a few more. So it
Hmm.
seems like you're getting that process down like shorter and shorter,
Hmm.
at least and like pretty much before you've even made it what it's going to do, and it's kind of working the way that we expected and everything.
Yeah, once you've made enough prototypes, you can pretty much tell, um, to a certain extent, what the foil is going to be like. Um, you can just judge by the profile shape. You can judge by the shape of the wing, the rake, all the different angles, whatever it is, and you can get quite a good idea of what it's going to feel like. So when someone wants something very specific in a foil, um, sometimes you've got a prototype to try and get that feel. If it's just pure performance, then you can rely on the computer quite a bit to crunch numbers to get decent um, profiles to use. But nothing makes up like a rider does, and good rider feedback. That's nothing compares with that. You can run whatever CFD you like or whatever simulation you like. Um, Good quality rider feedback to me is essential.
Yeah. Do you think there'll ever be a unicorn foil that, like, there's always a trade-off, right? Like with efficiency, and then, if you want to go high aspect, affects the way that you can turn sharply, and then you put in a dihedral in there to help it turn, which is what we did with the Hyper 2s. But do you think there's ever going to be a unicorn that does everything, or is there always going to be a trade-off? Or do you think as we go along, we're getting closer and closer to that one size fits all? Because it seems like on one hand we are, but then on the other hand, foils are becoming more discipline specific, right? So it's going more like if you win wing,
Fully.
yeah, or if you want to prone, you've got this one. If you want to downwind, you've got this.
Mm. You'll find that when you'll never have a foil that one foil does it all, obviously. Or what you'll find is a foil will excel in one specific discipline. However, I've been saying it for years now, and I really feel that someone is going to come up with foils that have um, moving parts, live hinges. So where you have ailerons on the actual foil controlled with gyroscopes and accelerometers. I think it's just a matter of time until someone comes up with that, and you have an app on your phone, and you can dial in how much camber you want, how much reflex you want. It can change according to speed, so you can dial in camber on your wings to get up on the foil, and then as you start picking up speed, it'll start dropping those flaps, and you can actually add in a little bit of camber for speed. I'm sure somebody's working on it as we speak, but yeah, who's first to market with it? Who knows? There are challenges in doing it, but I really think that that is going to be, who knows, it might take a year or two or 5 or 10 or whatever it is, but to me, that is the ultimate solution.
Yeah, well, I was just at a boat show in Europe and it's pretty interesting to see what some of those European companies are doing with the hydrofoil boats and jet skis and things like that, and with sensors on them, um, operated by AI, self-driving, self-correcting hydrofoils, which is pretty exciting. I think the whole
Yeah,
space is just super exciting, and
yeah,
it's drawn a lot of really intelligent and forward-thinking people into it as well. Like some of the people who are getting into it now are like, the tech guys from Silicon Valley, and so it's kind of attracting those kind of people, which is awesome.
yeah. Um, so I used to fly radio controlled helicopters, and you used to have a tail gyro only on your yaw axis. So on the back of your helicopter, you've got a propeller blade which stops the helicopter from yawing. So you'd have a gyro only on that axis. I'm talking now 15 years ago. But then they brought out stabilization systems where you'd have stabilization on X, Y, and Z. So now the old helicopters used to have a little paddle bar with weights on it, and that would stabilize the helicopter in X and Y. So by getting rid of that, now you've got stabilization on all three axes, and you can sit and change the gains. And it's exactly the same with the foil. You can now sit and fine tune your foil, to a crazy degree. And because you get rid of your tail stabilizer, you now don't have the drag of your tail stabilizer, you don't have the drag of your fuselage. So you've just got your mast and your front wing with this live hinges. So yeah, let's see who does it first.
So that leads into my next question, which is what inspires you? What keeps you going? What kind of gets you up in the morning to design foils? And where do you think, we're going to be in 5-10 years? I think you kind of answered that in the last one.
Yeah, pretty much. I think for me foiling, for me the whole bug about foiling was the efficiency. Coming from a kiting background, and all the kiters will know what I'm talking about. When you're trying to stay upwind, you're fighting. You're pulling hard in the kite. You're putting an edge of the board in, and you're trying to stay upwind. Whereas on a foil, all of that's gone. You're no longer fighting, to stay upwind. You go crazy angles upwind. It's just crazy, and the whole efficiency thing, where everyone's packed their kites away and they can no longer go and kite surf. You're now still foiling up and down, and you're doing all kinds of tricks, and I think that's one of the things that really I'm really drawn to is the efficiency of foils, and always thinking of how to make them more efficient. And I think that's the catalyst of hydrofoiling. It's the efficiency. That's what makes hydrofoiling work, is
Mhm.
because you ride the smallest little waves, the smallest amount of energy, and it's just so much fun. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, and the community as well is, like coming myself from the surfing background, and living on the Gold Coast in Australia, it's quite an aggressive place, and it's a bit of dog eat dog out there, and so to find foiling where I was speaking to my dad. He's been in surfing since the 70s. Like right when it was just kind of beginning to become popular, and I was like, this must have been what surfing felt like back then.
Yeah,
Like where everyone's still stoked and no one's telling you to fuck off out of the water, and
Yeah.
like, you know what I mean? Like, no, everyone's like, what gear are you riding? Everyone's looking at each other's gear, and everyone's still stoked. And that for me is why I love it so much,
yeah,
is just the community and everyone like progressing and everything like that.
mm.
It
No,
definitely
without a doubt.
feels a lot like the early days of kiteboarding to me, when everyone was really supportive, and you could hit someone up when you arrived in town, and they'd take you out to a local spot or whatever. Um,
Yeah,
and that was the same thing with the efficiency over windsurfing. Suddenly you had a way of powering yourself, which was you could get so much more out of the wind than you could with a board and a sail. And
yeah.
this is just another level to that.
Yeah.
I've got a good question here. Um,
Mm.
do you ever get designer's block? like writer's block for foil design? And if so, how do you overcome it?
I do badly. uh, to for me, I can't just come to the computer and start drawing. It's I have to plot the whole thing out in my head first and make everything try and work in my head long before I get to the computer. And sometimes I lay it at night thinking about how do you do this? How am I going to do that? How do coming up with ideas, things that I want to try, and then some days I'll come to the computer and I'll start drawing and everything will just fit together and it just works. And other days I want to throw this computer out the window where you fight the CAD. It just does not cooperate. It will not do the most simplest of tasks, and I want to. I get so mad. And my wife's like, "Babe, come for a cup of tea. Come." and I just leave it. I'm like, "Okay, no, put it down for half an hour, and you come back, and it takes you 3 seconds to do what you've spent 3 hours trying to do." So no, definitely get like you said, like a designer's block. It's sometimes you just need to stop, go to bed or go out or do something else, come back and tackle it. But like I say, sometimes everything just goes so smooth. Sometimes I'll draw a foil in literally a couple of hours and it's finished, complete. And then other times you'll sit drawing here for 3-4 days trying to do stuff. And that's the one thing about CAD is until you understand all the tools, you don't want the limitations of your drawing skills to limit what you're trying to design. So you need to be proficient in CAD to express what you want in the drawing. You don't want the drawing to. So in other words, it's a bit hard to explain. But for example, let's say a fillet. If you've got two angles that come together and you put a fillet there. So if you want to put a round edge there, so you come to the CAD program and you choose fillet and you click fillet and it goes, and you want to put, let's say, a 10mm fillet on there. And the computer says, no, you can't put a 10mm fillet on there. So now you're like, why not? So now what you do is you're going to try 9mm and let's see, will 9mm work? And 9mm won't work. So you say, let's try 5mm, and you click 5mm and it works. So now you've given in to allowing the computer to tell you what you can put there. Instead of understanding why can't I put a 10mm fillet there, but it allows me to put a 5mm. So now are you going to go along with a 5mm fillet, or are you going to stop and say, no, we need to find out why is it not allowing me to do this and to understand the reasons why not. And that in itself is a challenge, to, like I say, to express what you want. Because there's one thing about thinking of something in your mind and getting that onto paper, onto CAD, onto a drawing, can also be a bit of a challenge.
Do you find that you have more inspiration in a certain time of day? Like I heard a lot of writers and people have more inspiration at night or whatever.
Totally, I'm a night hawk. Yeah, I can't start drawing first thing in the morning. It's if it's simple stuff, yes, but my best hours are probably end of day, probably from 5 o'clock onwards, 5 o'clock to 9, 10 at night. That's when I'm pretty much when the overdose of caffeine really kicks in.
Me too.
The perfect foil all day and then design at night.
Yeah. But I find just in those 2-3 hours, from once the sun's gone down, those are my most productive hours, when it comes to drawing and thinking and definitely.
Here's a good one. Who's your favorite foiler to watch?
I don't even want to start with names. There's so many.
Oh well, okay.
Really.
How about we do this? Like, what do you like about Like, what do you think good foiling is?
It depends which discipline. So, I like all kinds of foiling. Everything from watching the kites, the guys racing. That's not really that exciting to watch the racing stuff unless it's really competitive and it's really tight. Um, but I enjoy watching it. Guys flying over the water at crazy speeds. But when it comes to surf foiling, um, pulling just long drawn out arcs, I think is really awesome to watch. Watching a bit of the aerobatics, even jumps and that kind of thing. Yeah, pretty much enjoy it all. I don't think there's one specific discipline that I like. Wow, I really love that. I mean, like downwinding. This is what I say to the guys: is foiling is not really. I suppose surf foiling is the best to watch. But I mean, if you go to wherever and you go and you watch wing foiling, especially on a lake or something, it's as boring as anything to watch. A person's just going up and down, mowing the lawn, doing a few jibes, tacks, whatever. It's not exactly exciting to watch. The moment they start busting out airs, it's like a different story. So yeah, I think for action, it's got to be in the ocean. It's got to be doing a few airs, I guess.
And what advice would you give? Like, we've seen, especially in the last 12 months, foiling's gone from something that's a bit of a hobby to now people are starting to take it seriously, and careers are starting to be formed. People are starting to get paid, and it's become clear that it's becoming a real industry and a real sport with competitions, and there's more and more comps coming up. We get emails all the time from either people wanting to be a team rider or wanting to design foils and asking you advice, and maybe those people would be watching this as well. So, like, what advice would you give, like an up and coming foil designer, um, on how, if they want to get started in the space, and then also like a rider as well?
For a foil designer, it's all about research, 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 research. You got to be doing. You have to understand all the basic principles of flight. I wouldn't bother to start making a foil until I understood that. Once I've understood that and understood um, how a foil acts, then I'd start working on doing a good drawing. And there's a lot of groups. There's a lot of groups on the net. There's a few on Facebook where the guys are extremely helpful. Expressing ideas. This works, that doesn't work. Don't do this. You're wasting your time with this, etc., etc. So definitely, if you want to make your own foil, it's extremely rewarding. If somebody wants to try it and is more of a hands-on kind of person, doesn't have two left hands, I would say go for it. It's awesome. It really is rewarding if you've got the patience, and it's it's not that difficult to make. It's difficult to make them look pretty, but to make them functional is not that difficult. Um, Go for it. That's what I say. Um, in terms of what's the other question? In terms of
For
riders,
a rider as well, like foilers,
if you want to get into the sport.
or
Um,
to become good at it, become it, do it as a career and things like that.
well, it's still a very niche sport. It's still quite a small sport. So to do it as a career, you're going to have exceptional skills. But for the younger generation, if I watch these young kids, who are starting at like 9 years old, 10 years old, um, if you are a parent and you do have a youngster who is um, athletic and wants to get into this kind of sport, um, by all means, I would say I'd highly encourage it, because it, the the skills that it gives you, I think, are incredible. If I think for myself, coming from a kiting background, and just when I would go and ride a twin tip or a surfboard, and then I'd climb onto the hydrofoil, and then when I go back to a surfboard, I feel so much more connected. I feel that I can feel that board so much better. Um, I feel that foiling has pushed my senses, made my senses way more aware. So now if I ride a surfboard or whatever other board, I can feel the pressure. It's so much more sensitive. So if you're teaching a youngster that sort of age, or someone who's getting into the sport, it's an incredible sense of achievement, extremely rewarding. So even if you don't take it to the professional level, if you do have the ability and you do have the means to get into foiling, I can guarantee you it's very rewarding. We joke about it where the guys say, I'm their drug dealer. Supplying them with foils. So, but I mean, that's what it's like. It's pretty much an addictive sport. You can challenge yourself. So, and I think that's also what I really liked about foiling is you can see your learning curve, and it doesn't take years and years and years to get anywhere. It's okay, to get really good is a different story, but you start off where you think it's absolutely impossible to stand on this board. That first time, I'm sure you remember it clear as anything, when that board first picks you up out of the water. You don't forget that. It's an incredible feeling. So yeah, as you go through the journey of starting as an absolute cook, thinking there's something wrong with your gear, to actually getting those first 20-30 meter rides in, I don't think you can explain it to someone. It's just incredible.
Yeah.
So yeah, I highly advise it. Go for it. To get better, you just got to put in the hours. That's pretty much what it comes to. You got to spend time on the forums, understanding, listening to the guys. Progression forums are taking off. The knowledge there is phenomenal. We've got we've got top riders who are members there who give out amazing advice. From tuning to everything. So yeah, learn as much as you can, and like I say, you got to put in the hours.
And just one thing I'd add to that as well is make sure you watch a lot of video of yourself. Try and get someone to film you as much as possible and break down your technique. And then also watch the other top guys as well and what they do and break down their technique, even put it in slow motion and
Yeah,
see what, like Cliff, you've been helping a lot of our riders with their techniques and things like that, and helping me as well with some of my video of what I'm doing wrong and things like
it's a bit
opening
of
my
a
shoulders more.
it's a bit of a two-edged sword, that when you first watch a video of yourself on a foil,
Yeah,
it's
that's
very
pretty.
disheartening.
Yeah, you have to
It's
hide the race
terrible.
plates, definitely.
When I was riding those Vipers, I thought I was Adam Bennett going down these waves and doing these awesome cars. And then I watched a video of myself and I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, you've got quite a long way to go.
Like, I'm giving up. This is too hard.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
Mm,
it's fun. It's reignited a passion in a lot of people, I think.
exactly.
Um, and yeah, it's making us feel like kids again.
Mm.
Like how it used to feel when you just got into it. Um, all right, here's a good one. You've designed quite a few foils now. What's your personal favorite wing out of all the ones you've designed?
Sure. Um, I don't know. They all each have their own um little traits, and some are different than others. Where I like this about this wing and I like that about that wing. But I think one that comes to mind the most is that hyper, hey? When I first made that very high aspect foil, I mean, it looked like nothing else that we'd seen. And I went out with Gumby on it, and we towed it, and there were literally no waves that day. And we towed behind a boat, and we're running towards the beach, and you have this tiny, tiny little bump that when you're on the swell, you can barely see that you're on the swell. And we were towing onto these, and we could just pick up that little bit of energy, and you could just fly along. And we were like, wow, this is crazy. You know, the efficiency just blew our minds that we could ride such a small little bump. And I think that sticks in my mind. You know, I'll never forget that day. It was a crazy day. So yeah, I think that hyper was pretty special.
And also, going back to something you said before about the design, yeah, everyone kind of understands the design, but what a lot of people don't understand that much is the layup that goes with it as well. And so how much of a foil's performance is the design versus the way it's laid up with the carbon, the different kind of quality carbon that you can get from, you know, high mod, you know, down to the lower grade stuff, and the flex of the actual wing as well, not just the mast. And a lot of people obviously know about mast flex. What about wing flex and stuff like that?
So I mean, as we're getting deeper and deeper into this game, you know, in the beginning, we were using just whatever carbon was available, but now getting further and further and pushing the performance higher and higher, we're using materials that are that work better. Like you say, using higher modulus carbon in the correct places and trying to make the foils as stiff as possible, while trying to keep the efficiency as high as possible to make a extremely stiff, rigid hydrofoil is not that difficult. However, making a efficient, stiff, rigid foil poses more of a challenge. So, yes, it is very important to utilize the materials to their strengths to make the product as strong as possible. But like I said earlier, the thing that attracts me the most to foiling is the efficiency. And if you lose the efficiency, I think you lose the whole magic of the foil. If you've ever ridden a foil and caught a piece of seaweed on it, it's like, you know, you literally feel like you've pulled up the handbrake. It feels terrible. Whereas when you ride a foil and it just glides through the water and it just feels great. And I think that's what I love. Even if it's a big foil, you know, that it still has efficiency. I think that is what I like. So yeah, I'm not crazy about big foils. I find, you know, some manufacturers are making these huge foils, and I think that they have their place, but I don't think that it's necessary to learn on these extremely large foils. There's a very small percentage of the market that has to learn on such big foils. I think, but for the average person, you know, you can ride on a relatively smaller foil that is still going to teach you everything that you need to know. But yeah, in terms of construction, sorry, I'm getting a bit off there, but in terms of construction, yes, you want the wing to be as stiff as possible. You want the mast to be as stiff as possible. Obviously, the fuselage, you want good solid connections. Yeah, keeping maximum efficiency.
So when you're designing a front wing, you know, for our new range, do you take into account what mast would be paired with the tail and everything like that, and how much does that affect the front wing?
Yeah, so obviously if you have a small front wing, you don't need such a stiff mast. So if you're riding like a little 100 square inch, you don't need a katana mast. Actually, I would say stay away from it, because you bring in on excess drag. So different story if you're using like a Hyper 210 and you're a heavy person. Then I'd say, yeah, fine, fair enough. Use the katana mast and a Hyper 210 or something like that. Then they fit together well. But for me, I've always said, always try and ride the smallest foil possible. So if you can get away with riding a 210, ride a 210. Even when you're learning, again, I don't think you need a particularly massive foil. I see people that weigh 50, 60 kilograms learning to ride on 300 square inch foils, and I'm like, in my opinion, it makes it even harder. Because you're riding like on this edge of the stall speed. If you just get a little bit more speed going, and you've ridden that foil twice and you've outgrown it. So yeah, I mean, that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk at the moment about stiffness of the mast, and also, stiffness versus flex, but also the efficiency of the mast, and like how much does the profile thickness of the mast affect the front wing? Can you get to a point where the mast is too thick and too stiff, and it actually lowers performance of the whole setup, and then it's a diminishing returns?
Yeah, sure. If your mast is very thick, you're dragging. You've got excess drag, so naturally your whole setup's going to be slower. That's why I say you always want to ride as small as possible. So if you can ride a thinner, slender mast that you're comfortable with, then yes, by all means, you use a thinner mast. If you can't feel the advantages of a thicker mast, then what's the point in using it? Yeah.
Yeah, right, that makes sense. Um,
Hmm.
so I've got one more question here about designing foils. The question is, how much time goes into designing a foil? Like, how long from start to finish?
Sure. It depends. It depends on how much of the foil. So if you're talking about just the front wing, are we doing a complete new fuselage? Is it the complete foil? Is it new mast, new everything? If it's just the front wing, then it goes from, if everything works out well and the profile that's been chosen, just getting the profile can take many hours. But once I've got the profile done, then it can take as little as 3-4 hours, but it could take probably, I would say, 4 or 5 times that easily. And also if you do iterations of it, just because of the way the drawing program works, you don't just swap the profiles run and it updates everything. So you've got to go back and make sure everything fits together again. So yeah, in good case scenario, I would say you can do a wing in 3 hours, 3 to 4 hours of drawing. But generally it's, I would say, double, triple that.
And that's just the initial CAD files, right?
Yeah.
And
Prototyping, I can do a prototype in a week. From the time that the CAD is done, to making the part, I can do it in just under a week, provided that everything goes right, from cutting the molds to making the first part. So it doesn't take too long. Then you've got another couple of weeks to get the prototype out to the rider. So you're looking at give or take a month turnaround, before you start getting feedback on the prototype.
Cool. And how do you, in South Africa, you've got your workshop there. How do you turn the design from a CAD to making a mold and the layup, and how do you choose the layup and everything for the prototype?
So it depends on the wing design. Obviously, if it's a high aspect, your forces on your wing are quite a lot more. So you tend to use a lot more unidirectional carbon than you do biaxial carbon, just purely because you don't load the wing up as much. So the flex on the wing is a bit more critical than the torsion on the wing. So, and high aspects don't really go that fast, generally speaking. So yeah, I don't tend to put as much biaxial carbon in them as I would, for example, in a mast. A mast you can load up tremendously. Wings not as much. So yeah, I try and make them stiffer in flex.
So the general rule is basically the longer the span, the more stiffer you need to make them, and then the shorter the span, like with our mid aspects.
Yeah, and also the thickness of the profile. So if your profile is very thin, it's going to flex a lot. If your profile is very short and fat, it's going to be extremely rigid. Like a low aspect foil, they're very easy to make very stiff, whereas a high aspect foil requires more materials and it requires stiffer materials to keep the stiffness up.
And do you think weight plays a part in it as well? There's a lot of brands that have alu stuff and some quite heavy gear.
So the biggest difference is that where you're going to notice is when you carry the gear. That's without a doubt. When you're on the water itself, you will notice a difference in pumping, but it's not a drastic, huge difference. Like I say, once you're on the foil, if you're just carving and turning and gliding and that kind of thing, you're not going to notice the difference that much. I think where you'll know, I mean, I don't ride aluminium gear, so I've only ridden one foil, I think, with the aluminium fuselage, and I just remember how heavy the thing was carrying it. That's all I
Yeah,
remember,
for
how
sure.
heavy it was. But in terms of weight of the setup, I've got a few guys that have ridden some of my old foils, which were ultra light, because they're light riders. They only weigh 55, 60 kilos, and they absolutely love it. And they've ridden heavier gear, and they reckon it's just horrible, just because they're such small riders. So if you are a smaller rider, then I think it makes more so of a difference than if you're a rider of 90, 100 kilos. Having an extra kilo on your foil, I don't think it's going to make, it's not night and day difference.
Cool. We're getting close to the top of the hour now. This has been a super
Hmm.
interesting chat. So we got a couple more questions. James, I know you had a couple of questions for Cliff. Do you want
Yeah,
to finish this off?
yeah. I think I just wanted to talk about. Well, we did talk a little bit about technology that goes in there, the different types of carbon for strength and things. I'm still really fascinated about the crossover with the aeronautical design and the gliding profiles profiles and stuff that go into your hydrofoil profiles. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I mean they two totally different profiles. The ones flying through air and other ones flying through water, which has two completely different densities. So in my early days, I used to use profiles that were thicker towards the leading edge, and the more I've made more and more prototypes, the more I've shifted the maximum thickness, towards the midpoint, which is better for hydrodynamics, for cruising through water. So that's been quite a change.
Thinning them out, yeah.
Mm. But in terms of, as we said earlier, in terms of flight characteristics between aircraft and hydrofoils, yeah, like I said, the one is made to be a stable platform, the other one is made to be an unstable platform. Those are the two major differences between the two.
Now, I was thinking also about, I remember seeing one of those soaring videos in the early days with the gliders doing those incredibly high speed loops.
Dynamic soaring.
Dynamic soaring. And I was just listening to the Progression podcast last week, Kai Lenny's episode. He was talking about the upper limits of foil design. Now, he was saying there's a 50 knot threshold that it's very difficult to cross because the foil heats up. That seems crazy to me, that generates so much heat at that speed. How does that happen? Do you know about that?
Haven't got a clue. Haven't got to that speed yet.
No. Okay. Still working on it.
Yeah, I saw that there's different ways that they classifying who's the fastest. So there's one that's over a distance of, I think it's 500 meters, and then it's who's holding the speed for a certain amount of time. So there's different ways of classing who's the fastest, but I see the record was broken now recently in the past couple of weeks or so. I can't think what the exact speed was, but it's stupid fast. I don't want to be on a foil at that speed.
God,
No thanks. Yeah.
Would have bailed long before you got to that speed.
Yeah. Watching the wipeouts where they bounce on the water a few times first and then you sink. It's like, no.
Well, you see the young guys doing that on the lake winging, trying to get their personal best for speed, and they really fly. Incredible. Yeah. Oh, fantastic. That's been fascinating.
Yeah, that was a great chat.
Yeah.
So next week we've got tuning and shimming, and why it's important, and how much of a game changer it is. And I think a lot of people are really starting to realize how much of a game changer shimming your tail and tuning your gear is, and how much people are missing out on performance when they just try and plug and play. So that's going to be a really exciting chat. We've got some good questions already, and so the viewers that are watching, email us at info@unifoil.com with any of your questions, or you can reply to this video at the bottom in the comments section, and we'll incorporate any of your questions into the next one, which will probably be in 2 weeks' time from now. So, but we'll let you know. So, thanks, Cliff. Thanks, James. That was fascinating. And yeah, look forward to the next one.
Cool, guys.
Cheers.
Chat later.
Yes.